Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at Python. You sent over some stuff from beginning Python, and I got to say, I'm kind of fascinated by this idea that, with coding, you are in control.
Hmm.
It's like refreshingly different from, trying to reason with my cat about who gets to sit on the keyboard.
Yeah, there's definitely some appeal to that, right? It's not just about giving instructions. It's about, like, setting the rules that the computer has to follow
Hmm.
consistently and predictably.
Right.
That's like a level of order we don't really see a lot in the real world.
It's making me think of those Rube Goldberg machines where it's like one domino sets off this whole chain of events,
Yeah,
but we get to design the chain reaction. Now the book jumps right into this thing called the Python shell.
right.
Is that like a digital sandbox where we can just play around with code?
Exactly. It's your interactive playground for experimenting.
Yeah.
The book really encourages you to just type in examples and immediately see the results,
Okay.
which is like a fantastic way to learn. It's like having a conversation with the computer, testing out little snippets of code and seeing how it responds.
Okay, so let's say I want to make the computer say, hello world.
Okay.
The book mentions strings. Are those how we make that happen?
Absolutely. Strings are like the foundation of text in programming. They're
Yeah.
created using quotes, and Python's got like different types, single, double, even triple quotes.
Why so many options? Is it just to be fancy?
It's all about flexibility
Okay.
and, like those weird edge cases. Imagine you want the computer to print the sentence, "She said Python is awesome."
Right.
You need some way to tell the difference between the actual quotes in the sentence and the ones that are like defining the string itself.
Ah, so it's like when you use air quotes with your fingers to
Yeah.
make sure people know you're quoting somebody.
Exactly.
That's very clever. But how do we actually make this text, like, show up on the screen?
That's where the print function comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Takes your string and will prints it out, without those surrounding quotes.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that Python has like processed the information and is giving you back the result.
Okay.
The book also talks about using escape characters like N to format the output, creating line breaks and things like that.
So N would be like hitting the enter key.
Precisely. It's telling Python, hey, start a new line here. It's all about making the output look exactly how you want it.
Okay. And then there's string concatenation.
Yes.
Is that just a fancy way of saying sticking strings together?
Exactly. It's the programming equivalent of taking two pieces of string and tying them together.
Okay.
You can use the plus operator to combine strings, but it's important to remember to add in spaces or separators for readability.
Otherwise, you just end up with like a jumbled mess of words.
Imagine trying to read a sentence with no spaces between the words.
Yeah.
It'd be really hard to understand. The same principle applies to code.
Makes sense. Now, the book mentions format specifiers. Are those like fill in the blanks for strings?
That's a really good way to think about it.
Okay.
Format specifiers are like placeholders within a string that
Mhm.
let you insert values dynamically. So instead of hard coding a specific number or piece of text, you can use these format specifiers to create more flexible and reusable code.
Okay.
For example, percent is used for strings, and percents is used for integers.
Right.
And yes, there are specifiers for other data types as well. They give you this incredible control over how the information is presented.
So if I wanted to display like a price, I could use a format specifier to make sure it always shows up with 2 decimal places.
That's exactly right. That kind of control is super valuable in like data science or web development.
Okay. Let's talk numbers.
Okay.
The book mentions, integers, those are whole numbers, right?
Right.
And floating point numbers or floats,
Uh-huh.
those have decimals. Why is it so important for Python to differentiate between them?
It all boils down to like how Python actually handles calculations and the level of precision required.
Okay.
Integers are great for counting things,
Right.
but if you're dealing with like financial transactions or scientific measurements, you need that accuracy that those decimal points give you.
So if I divide 2 integers in Python 2.6, it just chops off the decimal part.
Yeah.
That seems kind of risky.
You're right to point that out. Fortunately, in Python, 3.1 division between integers will give you a float by default.
Okay.
It's one of the ways the language has evolved to be more intuitive.
I can definitely see why the book stresses understanding like the nuances between these number types.
Okay.
Okay, what about basic math operations? I see the plus, minus, multiply, divide, but what is this modulus operator?
The modulus operator,
Right.
represented by the percent sign.
Right.
It might seem a little weird at first, but it can be pretty handy.
Okay.
Gives you the remainder of a division.
So if I divide 10 by 3, the modulus would be 1.
Exactly. And this seemingly simple operation has all sorts of practical applications. Like you can use it to figure out if a number is even or odd,
Okay.
or even like if a year is a leap year.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool. So we've got our basic math operations. Does Python follow the usual order of operations like we learned back in school?
Absolutely. Parentheses are still your best friend when it comes to controlling the order in which calculations are performed.
Okay.
They remove any ambiguity
Yeah.
and ensure that Python does exactly what you intend,
Right.
not what it thinks you intend.
It's like back in math class, parentheses are crucial for avoiding those nasty surprises.
Exactly.
But even with the best intentions, mistakes happen, right?
Of course. And the book acknowledges that. It walks you through some common errors,
Okay.
like providing too many or too few arguments for a format specifier.
So it's like Python saying, hey, I need this specific information to do my job properly. Give me what I need.
Exactly. What's really helpful is that the book helps you decipher those like cryptic error messages
Okay.
and gives you clues on how to fix the problem.
So it's like having a built-in troubleshooting guide.
Right.
Now we've covered integers and floats. Are there any other like number systems that Python can handle?
Yeah, so this is where we get into slightly more niche territory.
Okay.
The book briefly mentions octal and hexadecimal.
Those sound vaguely familiar.
Yeah, octal uses base 8 and hexadecimal uses base 16. They're not something you'll use every day,
Right.
but they can be useful for certain tasks like low-level system programming or working with color codes in web development.
So it's like Python has these hidden superpowers for very specific situations.
It's all about having the right tool for the job, and Python, with its versatility, provides you with a really comprehensive toolkit.
Wow, we've covered a lot already. From the philosophy of programming to the details of strings and numbers, it's fascinating to see how this language is structured.
And we've only just scratched the surface. We haven't even touched on variables or those cool data structures the book mentions,
Right.
like tuples, lists, and dictionaries.
Okay, before we jump into those, what stands out to you so far as like the most intriguing aspect of Python?
For me, it's the focus on clarity and readability.
Mm-hmm.
Even in these basic concepts, you can see how Python tries to be human-friendly,
Yeah.
from like meaningful variable names to the way it uses indentation to structure the code. It's all about making programming more accessible and less intimidating.
I agree. It almost feels like Python's trying to have a conversation with you, not just bark orders at the computer.
Right.
Okay, let's dive into these variables and data structures.
Let's do it. I think you'll be amazed at how Python lets you organize and manipulate information in increasingly complex ways.
All right.
So,
Sounds good. Okay, so we've seen how Python handles these like fundamental data types, but real-world problems often involve juggling lots of information at once.
Right.
That's where variables come in.
exactly. Variables are like those labeled containers you see in like a well-organized workshop.
Okay.
They let us store and manipulate data by giving it a meaningful name
Right.
instead of trying to remember its exact location in the computer's memory.
So instead of me like trying to track down that number I calculated earlier, it's more like I have a box labeled total cost,
Exactly.
which is way easier to find and use later.
The book emphasizes that choosing like descriptive variable names actually makes your code self-documenting. You know, imagine the difference between trying to understand code that uses cryptic names like X and Y versus code that uses names like customer name and order amount.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like a messy workbench where you can never find the right tool
Right.
versus a well-organized one where everything has its place.
Exactly.
Okay, so we can store data in variables, but what about like changing or updating that data as our program runs?
So variables are dynamic. You can update their values. You can copy them to create new variables or even use them in calculations.
Mm.
The book uses this clever analogy of moving light bulbs between closets and lamps to show how variables can represent these changes in a system.
I love that analogy. It really helps you visualize how they work. You're not just stuck with the initial value. You can like adjust and adapt as needed.
Exactly.
Okay, ready to move on to those data structures you mentioned, tuples, lists, dictionaries. I am ready to get organized.
Excellent. Think of data structures as specialized containers for organizing these collections of information. They each have unique properties and use cases. It's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Lay it on me. What's a tuple?
So imagine a tuple as like a sealed package. Once you create a tuple, its contents can't be changed.
Okay.
It's immutable,
Yeah.
like those blister packs you sometimes have to wrestle with.
So a tuple's good for storing data that's fixed and shouldn't be modified, like maybe the days of the week or the months of the year.
Exactly. Now let's compare that to a list. A list is more like a dynamic shopping list.
Okay.
You can add items, remove items, change the order.
Yeah.
It's mutable and flexible.
Okay, so a list is great for when you need to manipulate a collection of data that might change over time.
Right.
What about dictionaries? Those sound intriguing.
Think of a dictionary as like a super organized address book.
Okay.
Each entry has a unique key, like a person's name,
Right.
and an associated value, like your phone number.
Yeah.
And you can quickly look up a value by using its corresponding key.
So if I wanted to store like user preferences for my app, I could use a dictionary to associate each setting with a unique key,
Yeah.
making it easy to access and modify those settings.
That's a perfect example. Dictionaries are incredibly versatile and used extensively for tasks like that.
Okay.
Now let's actually dive into how we work with these data structures in Python.
Lead the way. I'm eager to see how these organizational powerhouses work in practice.
First, let's talk about how to create these structures. Python uses different symbols:
Okay.
parentheses for tuples, square brackets for lists, and curly braces for dictionaries.
So it's like Python has its own grammar for organizing data.
Yeah, and just like with regular grammar, using the correct punctuation is really important. Now, how about accessing the individual elements within these structures? That's where indexing comes in.
Okay, indexing, remind me how that works.
Think of each element in a tuple or list as having a numbered position,
Okay.
starting with 0. So the first element has an index of 0,
Right.
the second one has an index of 1, and so on.
It's that zero-based indexing thing.
Yeah.
It's like programmers start counting at 0 instead of 1.
Exactly. It might seem a little odd at first,
Right.
but it's a convention you'll find in a lot of programming languages,
Right.
including Python. To access a specific element, you use its index within square brackets.
So if I have a list called colors containing red, green, and blue, I could access green by using colors 1.
That's exactly right. You've mastered indexing.
Right.
Now, what if you want to know how many elements are in your tuple or list? That's where this handy function len comes in.
So if I used len colors, it would return 3 because there are 3 colors in the list.
You got it.
Yeah.
Len is especially useful when you want to loop through all the elements in a data structure and do something to each one.
Okay.
Now, let's get back to the specific quirks of each structure.
Right.
You mentioned that tuples are immutable.
Right.
What happens if you try to change an element in a tuple?
Mm.
Python will very politely but firmly tell you, no, you can't do that.
Okay.
You'll get an error message saying that tuples are for storing unchanging data. Lists, on the other hand, are all about flexibility. You can modify elements, add new ones using methods like append and extend,
Right.
or even remove elements.
So it's like with a list, I'm constantly like shaping and reshaping the data it contains.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful. Now, what about dictionaries? How do we access values using those keys you mentioned?
It's actually similar to indexing, but instead of using a number, you
Okay.
use the key itself within square brackets.
Okay.
So if you have a dictionary called phone book and you want to get the phone number for Alice, you would use phone book Alice.
So it's like using a word to look up a definition in a real dictionary.
Exactly.
Now, what if I try to access a key that doesn't exist in the dictionary? Will Python throw a tantrum?
Python will let you know that the key is missing, but it's not going to have a meltdown or anything. It's a good practice to check if a key actually exists before you try to use it.
Okay.
You can use the in operator for that.
So it's like Python provides these safety checks to help us avoid those errors. I'm really starting to appreciate how well thought out this language is.
Yeah, it's quite elegant.
This deep dive into data structures has been really insightful. It's amazing how Python gives us so much control over how we organize information.
And remember, we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
Imagine what you can do when you combine these data structures with loops and functions and the power of object-oriented programming.
Right.
But before we venture into those exciting realms,
Okay.
what stands out to you as the most intriguing aspect of these data structures?
For me, it's how dynamic these structures are, especially lists and dictionaries.
Right.
They can grow and shrink, be
Yeah.
reorganized. It's like how data in the real world always changes.
You got it. That adaptability is key to programming.
Right.
It lets us take this raw data and process it, make decisions based on it, and
Mhm.
ultimately generate something meaningful.
It's like those building toys where you start with simple blocks but can make crazy complex stuff just by connecting them in different ways.
I love that analogy. And the book's really good at grounding these concepts with practical examples.
Right.
Like making a breakfast menu with lists or
Yeah.
tracking light bulbs using dictionaries.
Yeah, those real-world connections really help you understand the power of these tools.
Right.
Okay, so we've gone from the core idea of Python through all those details of strings and numbers, and now these powerful data structures,
Right.
it's clear that this language offers like a structured yet intuitive way to really control computers.
And we're just getting started. The book hints at even more exciting stuff,
Okay.
like functions, classes, and modules. Those are the building blocks for making really complex and elegant programs.
Wow.
It even mentions extending Python with other languages like C and using frameworks for web development.
Hmm.
Talk about a huge world to explore. What excites you most about Python?
What gets me is that balance between power and accessibility.
Right.
You can use Python for like simple scripts or huge applications, and it never feels too scary.
I totally agree. Python's versatility and its really supportive community make it great for both beginners and experienced programmers.
It's like having that trusty Swiss Army knife of programming tools.
Yeah.
Adaptable, reliable, ready for anything.
Well said. And with all the libraries and frameworks, Python's always changing, offering tons of possibilities for being creative and making new stuff.
So on that note of endless possibilities, I think we've reached the end of our Python deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored a lot from the basic ideas to the details of data structures, and even gotten a peek at more advanced concepts.
It's been a really cool journey, and hopefully our listener feels inspired to learn more about Python.
If this deep dive has got you curious, we definitely recommend checking out Beginning Python. There's
Yeah.
a whole world of programming out there just waiting to be discovered.
And remember, the most important things are curiosity,
Right.
a playful attitude, and a willingness to experiment.
Definitely.
Don't be afraid of those error messages. They're just learning opportunities in disguise.
Absolutely. Embrace the challenge. Have fun, and who knows, maybe you'll be writing the next awesome Python program.
You never know.
Until next time, keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.
There's always more to learn and explore.
Happy coding.